This is Laura. Laura is about to make the biggest presentation of her career. But her presentation didn't really start here. It started back when she was asked to create it. Let's back up a little bit. Laura has just been asked to do a presentation, and she is nervous. The first thing Laura needs to do is stop and take a deep breath. She's going to do a great job and it's going to be okay. The second thing she needs to do is reframe her thinking. This isn't nervousness she's feeling, it's excitement. Before Laura can start writing her presentation, she needs to gather information. Who will the audience be? What will the presentation be about? When will she be presenting and how long will she have to present? Where will the presentation take place? And how will she present? Through a demonstration, a speech, or a slideshow? This information will help Laura be more prepared for her presentation, make it more tailored to her audience and the location, and make the presentation better. It's helpful to write down the information so it can be referenced later. Laura has gathered the information she needs to start writing the presentation. Remember, the questions were who, what, when, where, and how. But there are two other important points that need to be addressed before the presentation is written. They are time and message. It's important to find out exactly how much time you will have to make your presentation from start to finish. Going over time is disrespectful to the audience and the speakers coming after you. The message is the main point of your presentation. What is the most important thing you want the audience to remember? When you're writing a speech or a presentation, you have a few options. You can write out the entire speech, or you can write an outline of the speech on note cards or a piece of paper. Either way is fine. What you don't want to do is spend the entire presentation reading from the script or forget it entirely. When you're giving a speech, your goal is to explain, persuade, or entertain. You can explain how something is done, you can persuade the audience to agree with you, or you can entertain the audience. Here's an example of an outline of a speech. You have the hook, which grabs the audience's attention and draws them in to hear what you have to say next. Then the introduction, where you state the argument you're making. Also, you can briefly, in a sentence or two, go over the main points you're going to use to support your argument. After that is the body of your speech. Here's where you make your points to support your argument and use details and stories to support your points. Finally, your conclusion. In your conclusion, you can recap what you said during the speech and end on a line, story, or idea that you want the audience to remember. Even if you don't memorize any other part of your speech, it's useful to memorize the first and the last lines. That's for two reasons. The first reason is those are the parts that the audience is most likely to remember. The second reason is that memorizing these two parts keeps you from stumbling at the beginning and end of your speech. Another useful technique in speech writing is the STAR method. You may have heard of the STAR method being used in interviews, and it works in speeches in much the same way. You can turn data and processes into stories, which audiences are more receptive to. You start with the situation that you were in. Then you describe your responsibility, your task within that situation. You describe the actions that you took, and finally, the result of the actions that you took. Ethos, pathos, and logos are important concepts in speech writing. These are what your audience responds to. Every great speech contains at least one of these concepts, and many contain all three. Ethos is concerned with the ethical side of your argument, what's right and what's wrong. Pathos is the feeling that your argument evokes in your audience. Logos is concerned with the logical side, the thinking side of your argument. If you can win over your audience's hearts, minds, and their consciences, you have a powerful speech on your hands. Some more tips to make your speeches more powerful include using the power of threes, which is to use a set of 3 examples, 3 items, 3 slogans with 3 items in it, to make your speeches seem more powerful, to make your examples seem more powerful. Use storytelling, vivid stories, to create images and scenes in your audience's mind. That is what they will remember. Use concrete examples when explaining things. That gives your audience a better picture of what you're talking about and helps them grasp your point more easily. Pauses. Don't be afraid to use pauses in your speeches. This gives you more gravitas, and it also gives you more believability. It lets the audience know that you have put thought into your speech. Use repetition for emphasis. You can repeat things whenever you really want the audience to remember this particular point that you're saying. Practical tips are to look up how to pronounce things ahead of time. Use correct phrases. Don't use incorrect phrases because you lose credibility with your audience. And keep your speech tight. Don't ramble or your audience will lose attention. Stick to your time limit. This is very important because, as was said earlier, it's disrespectful to the audience and to the people who will come after you if you go over your time limit, and also your audience will stop paying attention to you. The most important thing whenever you're making a speech or a presentation, whether you're using it to explain, to persuade, or to entertain, whether you're writing an outline or you're writing the entire speech out and memorizing it, you need to practice. And you need to practice, and you need to practice. Practice in front of a mirror. Practice in front of your friends. Practice in the car driving home from work. Practice so that the words come out smoother and you know what you're going to say. Slides can be a useful tool for presentation. No, not that kind of slide. Here we go. Slides can be a useful tool, but they could also bring your presentation down. Here are some worst practices for slideshows and some best practices. Worst practices for slideshows include using too many words per slide, not enough space, a bright background, teeny tiny writing, too many words per sentence, making the lines long and drawn out and difficult for the audience to see, especially the people in the back rows. Your entire script written on the slide so you're reading off of it instead of looking at your audience, like I'm doing right now. No one will listen to you. They will be reading the slide instead of listening to you. Using too many pictures crammed into one space, using no pictures at all and only using words, using pictures that don't fit the slide or the tone or the rest of the presentation, using unprofessional slides or pictures. Or worse. Slides are meant to be a visual aid to support your speaking, showing pictures and important points for the audience to remember. They aren't meant to overpower you or overshadow you. Here are some best practices for slideshows. Use a dark background that's easier on the audience's eyes. Use a few words per line, not entire sentences. Use a few lines per slide. Nobody wants to sit there and read an entire paragraph written on a slideshow. Use words large enough to see, especially for the people in the very back rows of the audience. Use pictures, relevant pictures that will support your argument. Don't read off the slide. The people are there to hear you speak. If they wanted to read off the slide, they could just download it or take pictures and read it at home. Laura has gathered information, written her speech, made the slideshow, and now she's ready to present, right? Well, not so fast. There's a few other things to take care of. Laura needs to arrive early enough to make sure that all the technology works, the speakers, the microphones, and whatever format her slideshow is on. If there's something wrong with her slideshow and she gets there too late to fix it, she might be making her presentation without a slideshow at all. Unless you're behind a podium with a microphone on it, you're not trapped in one spot. You can move around the stage. One option is to have a handheld microphone, but this isn't necessarily the best option because then you're concerned with making sure that your voice is going into the microphone and you're holding it correctly. And also, it kind of blocks your body, and that's a closed gesture, and you want an open gesture. We'll get to that next. A better option is to use a hands-free microphone if you can get one. Gestures are used in speeches for many, many different reasons. You can use them to make points, to emphasize things, to evoke feelings in your audience, to gain your audience's trust, to keep your audience's attention, and it even helps you as a speaker increase your confidence and as a memory aid. The best gestures to use during a speech are open gestures, not blocking your body, not blocking the front of your chest, dynamic, and actiony, relevant to the tone and the point that you're trying to make, and diverse. You don't want to use the same gesture or two gestures over and over. That's boring and you're going to lose the audience's attention. You can also use gestures, facial expressions, and your voice to show the audience how you're feeling. This is an important part of pathos like we talked about earlier. What you don't want to do is have your arms in front of you blocking your body. This decreases audience trust in you, and it might decrease your confidence too. Another thing you don't want to do is to turn your back on the audience, whether it's to read a slide or to do something else. It's kind of disrespectful to your audience, and they'll lose interest in you. They also won't be able to hear what you're saying because you're not facing them. When you're giving a speech, you want to speak slowly and clearly. This does two things. The first thing is it increases audience's trust in you, because you're not rushing through the speech and trying to get to the end. The second thing it does, it helps the audience hear and understand what you're saying. Don't be afraid of pauses. Pauses can be used to show the audience that you are considering what you're saying and you're not saying it lightly. This also increases audience's trust in you. Pause instead of Whenever you're tempted to use filler words like pause instead. Inflect your voice, show emotions. This is part of the pathos that we were talking about earlier. You can use your voice to sound happy and excited. You can use your voice to sound angry or disappointed. Raise your volume. When you raise your volume, you sound more powerful, and sometimes you also feel more powerful. Speak with power. You know what you're talking about. This is your speech. This is your time. You have the audience's attention. Don't be nervous and don't be timid. Whenever you do feel these emotions rising up, two things you can do are to increase your volume, which increases your confidence, and also use an open gesture. Spread your arms out and just relax. You have the audience's attention. This is your time. If technical difficulties occur during your speech, say the power cuts out or your microphone stops working, don't worry about it. Just stay calm and roll with it. It'll be okay. Laura has gathered the information, written the speech, made the slideshow, and successfully gave her presentation. All that's left to do is listen to that sweet, sweet applause.